Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on Drive Impact by Design. Let me give an introduction to our acclaimed and admired speaker of tonight, Sebastian Gier. Sebastian is a strategic designer that designs brand shaping and positive human experience. Besides designing future digital mobility experiences at BMW Group since 2017, he's also running the Design Drives podcast since 2019, where he interviews design leaders from around the world to talk about the impact of design. He gained many international design recognitions and had the chance to be invited to speak at conferences around the world on design and innovation. In addition to his international work experience in both consulting and in-house studios, he gained a master in advanced product design in Sweden, as well as a bachelor in industrial design at the Folkwang University in Germany. A very warm welcome to you, Sebastian. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you now.
Thanks, Shama, for the introduction and the invitation, and also the Institute for the invitation. I'm really grateful to be invited here as part of this great web series. My name is Sebastian Gier, and I'm working at BMW on the one side and also running my podcast on the other side. Just sharing my screen. I hope you can see it now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
And I'm going to talk about driving impact by design. And as I said, in terms of my background, on the one side, I work at BMW in the UX UI design team on automotive experiences. This can be in the in-car scenario where it's about the digital interfaces in the car, but it can be also around apps and services that are happening outside of the car. And on the other side, I'm running a podcast called Design Drives, which is a weekly podcast about basically the impact of design, where I interview different design leaders, design practitioners about their learnings, why, how, and what design drives forward. Design Drives also has turned into a conference beginning of this year, just before COVID happened. So we're going to see how we move forward with that conference series. But that happened in February this year, actually during Munich Creative Business Week, with around 85 people joining us there. And in context of that podcast, I'm actually learning a lot about the role of design within organizations, the role of design for innovation. And the people I'm interviewing can have different backgrounds. On the one side, it can be people that coming from a tech background or let's say tech company background, working in great design cultures, for example, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft and many others, and bring their insights working in these environments. Then on the other side, I also interview people who are entrepreneurs themselves or so-called design entrepreneurs. So maybe designer, people who have a design background, but then went into a more entrepreneurial journey, founding companies. So I talk also a lot about founding members of companies which have a background of design, how they bring design into the discussion there. And then I'm also talking to people who have their own creative ventures in terms of creative agencies or consulting studios, and see how they collaborate with in-house studios or other partners or startups on bringing design to the conversation and trying to create a positive effect for the partners. So it's been really interesting. We have 41 episodes out. Today, actually, episode 42 is going to be launched. And I'm super grateful for the insights there. And what I'm going to talk today about is a lot of insights drawn from these conversations that I had with these people. But before we jump into the content already, I would really like to get a better understanding about the audience that we have here. So I heard there's a pool function in place, and we could ask one question here. And I would really like to understand how you would describe your role. Would you consider yourself somebody that works more in product management or the product manager? Are you having a background in design or user experience? And is that your primary role? You have an engineering background. or do you say you don't fit in any of these groups? So I see like the first answers coming in. I think you have to go into the pull function of the Zoom software, and then you can basically find a pool. Just leave this running maybe for a couple of more seconds. There are answers already coming in. Seems like things are evened out between product management, design, UX, and engineering. So this is great for me as a bit of a context. All right. So when it comes about designing for impact, from the experiences I made talking to these different design leaders, there are actually two kind of aspects how this could play out. On the one side, it can be very indirect impact. So then oftentimes it's really hard to see the direct impact. So you can work in the process part, you can work in the research side. There could also be that you work more with design facilitation. So that's the one side I'm going to spend the first part of my talk on. And the second part is going to be a little bit more about the more direct output of design, which can be about designing outcomes for end users in a very direct way. For example, UX UI or industrial design, or it can be also about the actual final design delivery that you are doing. So you're very close to the final artifact or experience. And design basically crosses both areas, right? So design can have an involvement at a very early stage where things are very abstract, but then also obviously traditionally coming from the area of a very direct role of the kind of end result. And so I'm going to talk about these two sides. But before we do that, I would have one more question for you, again, to get a better understanding about the audience. How would you describe your role? Are you, in terms of which kind of senior level or which kind of area and background you're working in? Are you more, would you consider yourself a student? Are you considering yourself an employee, junior, mid-level, maybe even manager? Or are you working on director level, directing multiple people underneath you, more senior role? Or are you a founder of your own company? And I know that especially these days, and especially during Corona, a lot of people would probably think they want to cross multiple things here. So then just pick the one that you basically spend the most time on. But I assume a lot of people probably, I could imagine, have some kind of side hustle. So I see a clear direction here. So most people pick the option B, junior, mid-level, design, employee, manager. So this is, I think then really great. I think the content really fits great for that audience. So let me start by maybe giving you an overview of the different areas. So I think we're going to talk about discovery and exploration phase. And each of these aspects, I will bring examples into play, basically. How building and playing can be a way for design to have impact, how observing and immersing plays an important role, but also emphasizing and communicating. And then oftentimes when it comes about facilitation, unlearning and innovating, and really maybe break some of your assumptions that you have. Or help the group that works on something to break the assumptions. And then when it comes to the outcome, looking at strategy making, about the relationship of different stakeholders, because it's not everything is done by design themselves or from the design team. It's the collaboration that matters. We're also going to talk about design visualization as actually a key component. And then also about how design can create confidence, reduce risk, and then ultimately, in a very mature way, also actually empowers other people in the company, and basically makes design that's something that feels inclusive in a bigger organization. So Let me start also by maybe pointing out that it's obviously a very difficult time that we're all in. And it's sometimes hard to be optimistic, but I think it's also good to remember that actually, there's also, opportunity in there. And I hope also my talk and maybe some of the examples that you see from the people I interviewed in the podcast maybe are motivating in that way, that each challenge is also an opportunity. And if you look at the past crisis in 2008, for example, there actually was a moment in time where a lot of great companies were founded. So I think it provides new opportunities as well of aspects and new requirements that nobody has thought about yet. So let me jump into the first aspect, so discovering and exploring. Actually, in the first episode of the podcast, I talked to Cheryl Platts. She was one of the first designers on the Amazon Alexa team. And she talks about the importance of context as it provides a space for innovation, in a sense that if you, for example, would, and she talks about the Amazon Alexa process where basically nothing there was in place yet when it comes about like how this final product should be. And Alexa was one of the very first mass market speakers, right? And they had to come up with all the use cases and scenarios to start with, right? So basically, it was a lot about failing actually with prototyping. So she talks about having different rooms that provide context in order to play out certain scenarios. So they would have a kitchen, they would have a bedroom, a bathroom. And then kind of playing out different scenarios during the day, like, getting dressed in the morning or cooking something or getting ready in the bath, right? So, and then they would see what feels right to say to an artifact in that moment. And you can't do these things on a post-it, and you can't do these things on looking at your UX UI software. You really need to be in a context. You need to play it out and then kind of emphasize with that experience that you're playing out if that question that you're asking, if these kind of scenarios are actually making sense. Because especially have such a new field, you need to come up with all the use cases in the first place and really see how could there actually be a benefit of such a product, right? Because especially if people have to adapt a new kind of vertical, a new kind of product vertical, you really need to also provide guidance in terms of like how this product could actually suit in the life of the end user, right? And really provide value. So she talks a lot about role playing and how context was actually key to come up with all of this. And her process in all of that, and when they pitched it to Jeff Bezos the first time, and basically the importance of immersion and role playing in the process. So I think especially if we talk about, I think sometimes really good to leave the designer desk. This is an aspect that will come up with and also in the next slides. But I think we should not be stuck to the screen itself, but also try to leave the screen and try to play out these things on the journey in the actual environment, because there's going to be complete new ideas coming up and you're going to emphasize so much more with the end user. And this is actually a really great space for design because we can prototype very quickly. Right, we can come up with these experiences in sometimes very quick and rough way, and there doesn't need to be any heavy engineering yet, right? Second aspect is the aspect of building and playing. And it's kind of linked to the first example we saw here. I tried to bring in a bit of a personal example of myself. So I was interning at DesignWorks in LA, design consultancy from BMW. And basically there was a project with an aviation company, and it was about a business class interior. I know it's not the greatest time to talk about flight experiences or business class experiences, but maybe it is actually, right? Because as I said initially, right, now there are completely new requirements in the space that nobody has thought about yet. So you could also see the opposite, I think. But regardless, talking about this example, it was all about basically coming up with that interior experience, and there was a lot of 3D work involved in terms of like designing the actual industrial design and that kind of space experience in 3D. But then at some point you really need to leave the designer desk again and basically prototype it. So I spent a lot of time in the workshop building 2 seats and the environment that the passenger sits in cardboard on a wooden chair, and really, so we could really try out these things, because it's just going to be impossible in a 3D program to come up with these different interactions. So you try to play out, how does it feel to get to that seat? Where would you put your personal belongings? Where do you put your bag? Where do you put your smartphone? Where you put your laptop? What if you have like a small bag or something else? Where do you put it? You try out different interactions. You see what feels good, right? And by playing out the interactions, and it's not about doing a fancy prototype. It's just about giving kind of a space that you can sort of interact with, and just having cardboard and then glue. And just try it out, basically. And so we would do role plays, like one person, for example, would bring the food. And then like, okay, I'm getting the food. Where do I place now, like my laptop, right? Like how is the desk falling out, right? How about the digital experience in front of you? How is that reacting? And then also trying to play out edge cases, right? What about having my food done earlier, right? Can I place it somewhere? The tray, for example. So we played out all of these scenarios, and then basically you can go back to digital workspace and kind of design these things. But it's so important, I think, to leave the designer desk at some point, again, trying to play out the journey, try to play out the experience. Another example I have with you, again, a personal example. I worked on my master thesis at BMW, which was about passenger experiences. And I tried to spend as much time of the project in the actual environment and kind of like end environment of the kind of experience or experience I want to come up with. So in this case, it would be the car, right? So I tried to turn the car basically into a design studio, tried to do prototyping there, brainstorming there, invited people to drive and looked at how they would enjoy the ride from a passenger perspective, not a driver perspective, but a passenger perspective. What are their user needs? And again, it kind of really was striking to me about the creativity that you kind of find when you leave your designer desk and actually go on the journey wherever your product experience is going to play out. And I think it's the same, for example, if you would design an app for a hospital. You can get a design brief with a lot of requirements and things that you need to fulfill, but why not? The question is, can you book a meeting room in the hospital for half a day, right? Can you do user research in the hospital or facilitate actual creative sessions in that actual end environment? And by that, you're going to pick up so much nuances and things you haven't even considered just by being in the space. Which I think totally gonna drive creativity and as well as empathy. So, and it's also a great space, obviously, if you can, to observe people, to observe the kind of end user you're designing for. And if you design a more complex journey, let's say your product or service will play out in multiple locations, try to play out that journey, right? You start maybe at home, you go to let's say a retail store, you have some kind of experience there, and then maybe the experience ends somewhere else, maybe after that, the retail experience, if we talk about a retail app, for example. So just try to be in these environments and at least, like, if you can, once in your design process, just to get an understanding. And I think it also helps, I think it's especially important the more complex your customer journey is, because the more complex it is, the more harder it is to understand from your designer desk. Another aspect is the importance of communicating insights and emphasizing. So basically, I talked to Laura Silver in one of the episodes, episode 18, and she's a advocate of inclusivity and accessibility. And one of her quotes, for example, is, I want people that have already something going against them to not also have the world going against them. I want us to stop making customers adapt to technology, but create technology that is fundamentally adaptable to them. And she is working in accessibility now at the Bank of America in the finance sector, where she talks a lot about like how you can make financial products more accessible, more easy to understand, more inclusive for people that maybe have a more distant relationship with that whole topic. But then also when it comes to the interaction level, a lot of great insights from her. She was working at Amazon before, and was working on the search experience, for example, for different markets. And one of the insights she was bringing that, in certain markets, they even search with emojis, right? I didn't know that. So that's something they try to implement. But besides that, I think the point here is that, we all are situational or temporarily disabled in some degree when it comes to our interaction or our access to technology or the product or service that we design. And it's not just about a certain group of people where this is sort of like a more constant scenario. And you will come up with so many more ideas that actually going to help so many people in their daily life when you start to consider this more in your design process. And especially if you kind of think you have hit a dead end at the innovation of your product or service, then I think maybe ask yourself if you have considered that aspect already, because you're going to come up with new ideas and new kind of scenarios and context scenarios that's going to drive new ideas and opportunities for innovation. So, and in my opportunity, really a driver for a lot of innovation. And as a designer, I think we have a role here to play, because when we, come up or discover these insights from our user research, we need to communicate them also to the other stakeholders and offer solutions, right? Or bring that to the table, because design very often has a high or good connection to user research or the interaction research. You come across these things and you can bring them to the discussion with your other stakeholders. So I think design also has a responsibility there to emphasize this. The next aspect is about unlearning and innovating and breaking your assumptions. So I talked to Mario von Molen, who's the author of a great book about counterintuitivity. And I'm talking with him in actually when we were in India, both of us speaking at a conference there called UX India. We talked about his book and about the importance of unlearning. So you can actually learn to unlearn, right? So I think that works, or kind of the output of that is basically to break your assumptions and to actually embrace the unknown. Very often as designers, we come to a new and we're not really the expert. There are also people who are way more expert than the designers in that in kind of problem that you need to solve. So I think that's actually an advantage sometimes, because we could come up with new questions that maybe are not asked anymore. I experienced that multiple times in projects, because if you at some point, if you work on something for too long, you kind of already have tried out a lot, and then kind of making a very quick decisions which are very good on the one side, but then also sometimes it make you overlook opportunities for innovation if you give certain things a different twist, or if you bring in new requirements to the conversation. So I think as designers, we should really embrace that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why companies hire design consultancies very often, because they may be not expert in a certain vertical, right? But they can come up with new ideas basically, and don't have so many assumptions about what works, what doesn't. And it's so important, especially if you work on something for a longer time, that you actually try to break your assumptions. There are great tools for that, right? To break your assumptions. So one way, obviously, is, if you think about your use case in the environment, you try to list down all of these different assumptions, which I think are the most basic and you would never question, and you list them all down. For example, grass is green, right? So you list down all of the things you would never question. You start to flip them, and basically would say they are the opposite of what they are right now. So you basically really change and flip the kind of like playing field you're designing in or innovating in, and you create new concepts based on that. And the concepts, there might be some of the weirdest concepts, and there's a lot of goofy stuff coming out, but there's also going to be some things that are completely new and really fresh. And I mean, this is just one example of like many tools, and Mario in his book talks about these kind of different tools and the advantage of doing that and using that on a daily basis when you're kind of faced with decisions or faced with a new project or opportunities. And I think it's very critical, and you can learn that this process of rethinking your thinking basically, or your quick decision making. I think one example in the book is the story of Abraham Wald. Probably some of you have already, or maybe already know it, and I'm sorry for repeating that story. But basically, the story is that Abraham Wald was a engineer in the Second World War in Eastern Europe, and was basically tasked with looking at the planes that were coming back from the battlegrounds and were landing back in Eastern Europe. And he should analyze the damages on the planes and then improve the areas where where the planes got hit the most during the battles, and then improve these areas. So this was his brief. And then he was thinking for a second or a longer time, and was basically saying, well, that's maybe a pretty linear thinking, right? Because actually, if they're hit in these areas, that means they're pretty stable in these areas. If they're hit in other areas where you see no damage on the planes, that means if they are hit in these areas, they don't come back. These are the planes that don't come back to us. And this was, so basically switched the whole brief, and it actually makes way more sense thinking about it. So you can, like, that's very often the case if you have like a design brief. Sometimes the thinking can be very linear. So, sometimes also makes sense to rethink if the kind of assumptions that are in place are correct, or if decisions were made too quick. So basically they went ahead and basically improved the areas where there was no damage, right? And made them better, which is a very counterintuitive thinking. So the next aspect is about the more maybe direct output of design. And I have, again, one personal example here before talking about the podcast examples again. The outcome of the project I showed earlier regarding the passenger experience and prototype in the car, one of the outputs was to look into the future of augmented reality and for the passengers, and what kind of experiences could be done using different technologies. And basically, if you design, or if you have design very early on involved into the process and use the capabilities of design, which are about also design visualization, which are about prototyping and making things feel real, even though they're sometimes not real, you can basically design a vision based on a strategy that could be basically balance between technology, business, and then user insights, and use design to just create it and put it out there, right? And then you can think about, and then you basically have something to discuss. You have an artifact to discuss with the other stakeholders and discuss if that makes sense. So design vision always, it never needs to be like the exact answer already, right? But it gives an indication about where a company could go, and it teases, right? And you can use it as a base of discussion, because if you never make things tangible, you never know, you never have a really good framework to discuss, because people need to see it. People need to help with the imagination sometimes. And and the great thing about that, especially if you really bring in design early on there, and the kind of human user perspective from design, it's gonna help you also to put design as part of your set of requirements. If you have to basically then design the actual product or service, right? Because very often there are business requirements, there are market requirements, there are technical requirements, but the question is, are there also user and design requirements in place? Because if you not have that, you're just going to put design basically as on top later on, and then it's always going to be just an add-on, right? And never really thought holistically in the process. So yeah, basically that concept here served as a discussion basically for and I think just shows basically the importance of like having a vision to discuss a strategic direction and evaluate futures basically. Next example I have here, another one from a personal, more personal one, before talking about the podcast examples again, is about a showcase that was done at BMW, where I had the amazing opportunity to contribute and help out, basically, which was basically about the future of the active driving experience. So basically evaluating this future. So it's called the BMW M Vision Next, which was all about basically how could we use augmented reality to make the user feel more safe. How could be augmented reality used to emphasize or increase the joy of driving? How do you incorporate new technologies? How are you contextual with information in your car? So where do you display information, and at what point in time, at which location? Because especially in the car, you have multiple locations where you can display information. And the more contextual you are, the lower the cognitive load for the end user, and the more orchestrated is the experience. So you want to orchestrate that through the different scenarios and environments that could happen on a journey. And so it was also a lot about how could we take out information, right? How could we reduce information? And also one part was how could this then play out with the digital experience outside of the cars, and how's the relationship between a vehicle that could pick you up and the relationship between that artifact and product and you as the user. And again, a vision really, I think, is a great framework here to also have a point of discussion here about how an experience could play out and really helps people with imagination, right? Moving forward, the next aspect is about solving business and user problems. So from a and you always want to combine these things, because the more they are combined, the better it is for both. Because that's going to be the best way to bring in design ideas and concepts into place if they could be combined or they could be based on a business problem. And the other question, obviously, if you work on a business problem, could you bring in user problems together with it to create a win-win? If you can create a win-win between a business and a user, you really have something in place that has a lot of potential. So, and I think when it comes to designers or speaking to designers, basically, I think it's important that designers build bridges in the company. One thing I learned when I was talking to Duke Paul, the VP of design at IBM, he was really pointing out that it's really important that as a design stakeholder, you basically make it very transparent that you have the same goals than also your business or your other stakeholders in the bigger environment, and you constantly have to prove that as well, right? And actually, what it's gonna help you with is you're gonna improve the how design is being seen in a company, because basically, if you offer your help to a business problem from a design side, then business stakeholders know you have the same goals, you're on the same mission, and you also show that design can actually contribute. But if you never offer, but it has to be something that's proactive coming from design side, because especially if design is something that's new in a company, then maybe people don't know how to deal with design or how to involve design in the process. So designers need to be proactive there and then offer help, offer contributions, and emphasizing with the business problem at hand, and see how you could contribute. For example, by leveraging user insights or leveraging user needs or and design ideas, basically where the business problems could be solved or benefited. So I think that's very important, and I think by that there's also a great discussion going on these days around new aspects like empathy or inclusion or accessibility, and I mean, these kind of things, if designers are passionate about these things and want to bring them to the discussion, that just works basically by being proactive, and then basically fuse them into the discussion, right? About discussions around dark UX, ethics around design solutions, and I think there's a lot of discussion going on in that space. But I think it's a little bit also up to designers to raise their voice when it comes to these topics. On the other side, I think it's very important also to understand that design can actually reduce risk if you involve it early. And that's very often how a lot of design leaders talk about design, is that design is a tool to reduce risk. One of the people I quoted here, Scott Wilson, who runs design studio in Chicago called Minimal, where I was interning a couple of years ago. And it's, I think, a great way to frame the value of design, and because I think it's very important to use business terms to describe the impact. And risk is a very important business term. And basically, by having design involved early, just like I was showing with the concepts and vision in the slides before, you can basically reduce risk a lot, because you save yourself a lot of engineering and a lot of other resources if you just give it a spin at an early point already, and see how that experience will play out, and then improve your platform for evaluation, if that is actually the correct future to move forward to. And another aspect Duke Paul is talking on in the podcast is the different levels of organizational readiness of design. Some people say it's 4 stages, some 5, some say it's like 6 stages of design, but it basically structures between timing on the one side, how early is design involved? Is design something that's just placed on top of your technical solution in the end to make it pretty, or is it involved during the engineering and development process, or is it actually something that would be a very high organizational readiness if it's actually something that's before coding, which is, I think, not really a black and white discussion, because I think you need obviously engineering and engineering innovations and explorations also oftentimes outside or without design involvement. But basically having design very early on involved, and basically also when it comes to an actual final consumer facing product service that you create, that you have design requirements in place, also to bring them as hard requirements into the play and into the conversation. The other aspects about about organization readiness of design is about capabilities. So oftentimes it starts with visual design as beautification, as in the sort of lower levels of organization readiness, and then kind of grows into multiple design capabilities. And the other aspect or other horizontal of organization readiness is basically around ownership. So, and at lower organization readiness, you have basically no owner of design in a company. At stage 2 or 3 or 4, you basically have a shared ownership. So basically shared among different people, but things start to be a little bit more transparent. And then at a level 5, you really have a clear design is part of the company leadership, and there's a clear organizational structure that helps to design to be part of the conversation. Another more personal examples to just like give you something tangible here. Was a concept I worked with Gardena during my times at the university some years ago, which was about the future of indoor gardening. So, and the business problem here is that a gardening company like Gardena, which is one or the biggest gardening company in the world, they have most of the income during summer, because that's where people buy gardening products, right? So the business problem here is income just during summer. How could we have also something during winter times, right? How could you use the skills and technical capabilities in the company to also offer something during the winter that could drive revenue, right? So you really need to think where the brand should go, right? And this is actually a great space for a design vision, or like a vision in general, or conceptual explorations. But we basically looked at the trend of indoor gardening, and basically at technical solutions that are in place there about hydro farming and different kinds of indoor farming technologies, and then basically fully visualize how a brand like Gardena could play out in such an environment. So how Gardena could play out during the winter time, how you get you the first connection with the company. How could you do just like a little welcome package or just a mini product that could be very cheap, and how could you grow into like a full end user that has a very strong relationship, maybe buys multiple consumables and grows the indoor garden. So we showed that user journey from just know the company or the brand a little bit, all the way to it's basically a full customer and a full end user of the brand, and showed how the product grows with that, as well as the digital experience. So we basically try to make a win-win between user needs and business needs. So, and I think that's where really design can have way more impact compared to if we have no business aspect to combine our ideation with. The next aspect is about the importance of design visualization. So one example I have here is with Shan He, which I interviewed in a podcast. She was one of the founding members of Uber's data visualization team. And basically they use data visualization or visualization as a tool to make quicker decisions and really create transparency. So they basically build a tool, CaptaGL. It's actually now open source. You can use it yourself. Basically enabling people to fuse in some data. And in Uber's case, it's a lot of local geodata and moving data, basically where people move at which times, and which kind of demographics, and which kind of products or services they're using at which time. And basically what they developed is a capacity internally to really very quickly take this massive amount of data and use it to visualize it and basically enable a much more transparent discussion about like where things need to go in terms of where do we need more Uber services, right? Where do we need more, where do we need to improve our service? Where do we have like a long waiting time? Where do people will need to wait the longest time? And you can look at a spreadsheet, but you can also look at a visualization like this. And I think it's way more transparent, right? And you're gonna just increase the speed. Just like with the examples before, visualization or using the skills of designers just to make quicker decisions, I think is also a great aspect of what design could offer. And actually they use it also in a way now to, give it to cities, so cities can see where they need to improve their transportation system, because obviously that's also a way how you can use that data. And I have basically 3 more slides here for you before wrapping up. So I talked to Brent Lovelady, who is global design leader and founder of Astro Studios in San Francisco, which is a design agency around industrial design and branding mostly. And besides running this for more than 25 years, he founded in 2011 something called Astro Gaming. So he used his design studio to create something where back then a lot of people believed in. So basically, really taking gamer more, emphasizing their needs more and providing a premium gaming product experience. Because most of the products that you can see on the market were pretty lousy. So basically, he had a vision on how this premium product experience should play out, how the branding should play out. They basically designed everything around that experience. And basically, by that, really, design was a way here to drive entrepreneurship, because again, you can visualize and prototype these things quickly. You can get feedback from people, and then obviously you need engineering to make it happen. But before that, also you can create a lot of confidence already, and this is what it comes down to: creating confidence for yourself as the people driving it, but also for external stakeholders if that idea makes sense. And it's a great success story because they design everything, create a company brand around it, put it out there, start to sell it, and basically it was sold for $85 million to Logitech in 2017. I think one of the leaders in the e-gaming space nowadays, and I think a great story around how design entrepreneurs could be, or designers could be involved in entrepreneurship. And then another story here about entrepreneurship, not entrepreneurship, so internal entrepreneurship. So basically, I talked to Shiva Jaini, who is a product manager at Google, and he worked a long time, for many years, he worked at YouTube. And at YouTube, they have, or at Google in general, they have this opportunity of using 20% of the time for an additional product, which they have the chance to pitch in certain times. So basically, he used the 20% at Google together with a colleague to basically design the YouTube Kids experience. So he was working at YouTube and kind of figured out that a lot of parents give their device to kids, but maybe the normal YouTube experience, not really made for kids that much. It's the button size will be the first point to start with. That is not really working for kids, but then it's also obviously about content and many more things. So what they did is they basically create a video about a prototype, how YouTube Kids would be, and how parents would use it, the kids would use it, and how much more of a better experience it is for everyone. Leveraging, based on a similar or same technology and content platform, but creating a completely different experience, actually, in fact. By orchestrating this in a different way. And it went viral in Google or YouTube. They got funding to put it into create a real product out of this. And nowadays you can even download it. And I think it's a great story how you can just like visualize an idea, visualize a concept, and just put it out there and see how people react, and use the power of design visualization to create confidence. Because if people would see the video and would see, not so sure if this is really a great experience, then you also learn something, right? But actually, if it works, it creates confidence for everyone to buy into the idea. And again, reducing risk in general. And then the last aspect I have with me here is the aspects of giving back. So basically, talk to multiple people in the podcast. To name here is Nick Cochran from ExxonMobil, or Robert Fabricant, who was a long time frog veteran, basically, who then started basically Dollback Design, which is all about empowering communities. So he worked a lot with tech companies and used design thinking, innovation methods there. But then he was saying, okay, we need to bring these frameworks, these skills, we need to bring them to other places of the world and really make local people be part of the change, and make local people be a part of the transformation that is happening in their communities. Because transformation or growth should not be, come from the outside, right? It should be, in best case, you involve the people locally that are living in this area to be part of that conversation. So that's what he's working on. He's saying basically design is a privilege, and basically we should bring this privilege to more people and empower people, not designers, but people with all kind of backgrounds, to use these methods to take part of the conversation. And I think on the upper part with Nick, it's more about giving back in terms of like an internal company, how he runs multiple workshops and a whole community internally for bringing design thinking to all parts of the company, making sales, engineering, everything, and build bridges in the end. So I think that's also important to really unleash more human potential, basically. So I just have a last question. I don't know, we're running a little bit out of time. I would really love to know, looking at these 10 examples I showed you about areas of design, how many of them you already use in your organizational environment you work with. So basically, do you use none of these things? Do you use less than 50% of the aspects I was showing? Are you using more than 50% or using all of them anyways already? So I see answers coming in. Most people are kind of pointing out between less than 50% or more than 50%. So that shows that maybe there was something new also in the talk. That's great to hear. And yeah, I would really like to, thank you so much for the invitation. I hope it provided some value, and feel free to connect as well via LinkedIn or using the QR code here, and feel free to reach out to talk about design and the value of design. Happy to have a chat, and thank you so much. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you for the brilliant session, Sebastian. Really great insights. And as you can see in the Q&A window, we already have a few questions lined up for you. Okay. So let's start taking them. Just give me a moment here to share my screen. Mm-hmm. Right. So audience, please ask your questions in the Zoom Q&A window or on the LinkedIn thread. Let's make the best of Sebastian's 1 hour with us here. So let's take this first question from Rohit Nagpal. You could read at the same time, Sebastian, in the Q&A window. Mm-hmm. So question about unlearning and innovating. I liked your example about the plane. However, unlearning is a difficult process, and more so because you do not always see what you have to unlearn. Is it generally beneficial to invite an unbiased person from outside the project? Or do you have any best practices of unlearning?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And it depends a little bit on the scope as well when you have the opportunity, because very often maybe you don't have even the opportunity to think about it, because you just have to make a quick decision about something. And in that scenario, then I totally agree. It's like hard to see if you actually have to unlearn anything when it comes to a certain question, right? But if you have more time, if you start a new project, if you start a new product, and you work longer at a company, I would definitely recommend, looking at your question, the question about bringing unbiased person to the table. Yes, definitely. I experienced it myself so often. If you work on something for a longer period, it's so beneficial to bring in a person that has no clue what you're doing and has no clue about the product or service that you are developing, and just show it to them, or show them the problem you need to solve, and bring them in. And I think one way, it doesn't need to be like a completely external like person, or somebody like you just basically or finding someone on the street just to talk to. It can be also just someone from a different department that works on something completely different. So it can be someone that is close to you, but has nothing to do with the actual new idea or like task on hand. So that could be like a quick way to bring that in. And then actually it's very beneficial to actually, in the design thinking process, to bring in people that are not, to basically facilitate, right? And basically bring in diverse perspectives basically to the problem on hand. And not just work, if your design team, not just work with like the 3 designers and try to solve everything. It's not going to work. You need to bring in, you need to know business stakeholders, technology stakeholders, and then also somebody completely outside, maybe a salesperson, or even more unbiased person. And yeah, definitely can recommend that.
Thank you.
And when it comes about best practices also, it's going to be hard to go through them like here now in the Q&A, but I can definitely recommend the book from Mario. And then also there are really great tools in terms of like how to break your assumptions, and really like where you can see it step by step how you can follow that process. And I'm happy to chat later via LinkedIn about it.
Yeah. So thank you, Rohit, for that question. Taking the next question by Puneet. How can a designer include user inputs in case of something that is reactive or involves a high risk, such as medicines?
Okay, I need to read that question again. I'm sorry. How can a user include user input in case of something that is reactive or involves a high risk, such as medicines? Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a challenging question talking about medicines. I'm just trying to figure out how to, in which kind of other aspects. I mean, the question is always like, do you have actual access to user research? And sometimes it can be also a problem is actually, or maybe you have a user research that's going to challenge the whole business. But maybe you maybe need to find a way also to articulate that and find opportunities in there. But especially for medicines and high risks, I don't, to be honest, like have a really good answer to this. I mean, I would definitely recommend to bring in experts there when it comes to medicines, and see if it's and that could basically run this process and obviously evaluate the risks, right? So if you can't evaluate if there's something out of your scope, then I mean definitely bring in the aspects. I think I have a bit of a hard time to talk about medicines specifically because I didn't work so much in that space.
All right, thank you, Puneet, and that's a good question to ponder over for us as well. So let's take this next question from Pranav. What are the new behavioral patterns that you see emerging post-COVID?
I mean, just trying to come up with something that is not so generic that you already know it. I think there are new aspects obviously coming up, like digitalization, and I mean, you think you already know the kind of generic answers to that question. I'm just thinking about maybe some new things that are completely new. I think what's really changing, I think, is the aspect about, or it feels a little bit to me like the aspect around well-being and mental health is actually something that's really increasing. I think specifically if people spend a lot of time in their homes, they're more for themselves. I feel like this is definitely an important part, because it's going to be harder for people to disconnect work and private life. Things are more fluent, which increase stress. So especially if you have the same room, if you're working in the same room where you're also going to sleep, just mentally, like that's always going to play into just your mental well-being. So I see a lot of opportunities to orchestrate that better, or deal with that problem. About obviously there's a flexibility and like a lot of positive things to it, but there are also some sort of negative things that start to play out about loneliness. But then also I think people are even more stressed sometimes these days. And you don't feel so connected to other people. So I feel like there are a lot of opportunities up in the mental well-being space. Yeah.
So in view of time constraints, Sebastian will take these 2 questions, and then we can move on to the last part of the session. So the next question is from Miral. How can design students build creative confidence and take risks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, one thing is obviously that sometimes I know that especially these times it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging to come up with basically a good solution there, because it's harder for people to take risks. But it also, like I said, maybe it's actually the best moment to take a risk, especially if there's no other great opportunity out there, or let's say it's hard to find a job. Maybe it's the time to create your own thing, right? Or like work on your own product, maybe together with a developer if you're a designer. So I think when it comes to the risk part, you can also use the new flexibility we have in space, the new kind of work environment that a lot of people have about remote work, and the flexibility that you gain to start a side hustle, for example. You can take risk there, right? So you can have something that's safe and do like some risk basically on the side. But then as a student, basically you can do that while studying. And if you're kind of leaving your university and there's no great jobs out there, that's maybe the exact great best moment actually to maybe take a risk if you can. And creating confidence is going to take time. I know for myself, I was not very confident about my work when I was starting out. One way to gain confidence is also to, if your design solution improves people's life, that's going to make you more confident also about your creativity. So if you involve user research into your process and to bring back your solution to people, you're going to notice that you're going to create something that people like, and it's going to improve people's life, and you're going to create confidence and trust by that, and your own skills as well.
All right, so there's one last question from Narayanan. Sometimes design changes are expensive to implement. How do I sell such a design up the ladder?
That's a really good one. It's my favorite topic. And I know it's really challenging sometimes. But the question is it expensive? Really? Or maybe not, if you think about a business outcome that could come from a design change. What is the reason for the design change you want to have? and think about how it, again, is it improving the customer experience? Does it improve retention? Does it improve desirability of your product? That's always an easy one, right? Desirability, as designers, to bring that into play. But then you should use business terms to communicate your design idea, and again, combine business needs and business problems, which are about retention, which are about conversion, which are about new customers, getting into new markets, improve the brand recognition outside. There's some great studies out there in terms of if you just improve the design of a landing page, how much people are going to judge the first impression, right? You can bring in these arguments to the conversation and bring your design idea with it, right? Say your design idea is going to solve these kind of business problems. Don't say this design is just going to be more beautiful than the other one. That's just not going to be enough to invest a lot into a new development of a new UX UI component or a hardware component or whatever. So use business terms and communicate your idea that way. Sometimes you can even improve feasibility and make things easier for the technical side. So see how you can leverage a win-win with other stakeholders.
Awesome. So in view of the time constraints, we'll have to end the Q&A here. Mm-hmm. Thanks for the participation,
Thank you so much.
audience. Yes, and for any further questions, you can connect with Sebastian over LinkedIn or any other mediums. Right, so for the last part of the session, Sebastian, we need your help again. So help us pick the champion of curiosity. Like I mentioned before, we will be picking a winner for the digital course. And you can see the questions in the Q&A window in the answered section. So help us pick a good winner.
Let me just quickly scroll through it. I think, to be honest, I would probably pick the I would pick the last question about how the design changes are expensive and how to set it up the ladder. So yeah, that would be my pick if I have to pick. But all were great. All were really great.
Thank you for that. And Miral will get in touch with you with our free digital course. Congratulations.